I did some shows. I did quite a bit of like USA shows. Like what was the one? Royal Pains was one. I don't know if you remember that show at all. There was a show where it was Steve Buscemi. I did where I had dinner with Steve Buscemi, and we did Boardwalk Empire. I did a small stint on Boardwalk Empire for a little bit with him. I did some soap operas, so those were fun. Those were very interesting. Those were the most chill. Like everybody knew they're what they are. They're soap operas, so everybody's kind of chilling. And that was that was a pretty regular thing going on soap operas. I did All My Children and One Life to Live back or after they moved off air and they were online only shows.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Life of a Career podcast. Today we have Scot Renz, and Scot, can you just give us all a insight into what you do and who you are?
Yeah, Eric, thanks for having me on. So I'm currently a software engineer. That's how I'm kind of making my living day to day. Outside of that, I do some philanthropy work and some investments and stuff like that. So those are other kind of side projects I got going on. But yeah, for now, I'm a front-end software engineer at Glassdoor, which has been fantastic and kind of a weird route on how I got there. But yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Cool. Like, is that what you always wanted to do when you were a kid, to become a software engineer? Or
No. I didn't really, I wanted to like race cars, I wanted to do like stuff that was like probably not very realistic. I always thought like I was always big into cars and raced dirt bikes and stuff growing up. So that was always something I was mostly interested in, which kind of led into the building side of things. I bought a car when I was like a old 1973 El Camino that was trash, and like fixed it up when I was 13, and I just started working on that. Which that's kind of how I got here. I guess I'll start off from kind of the beginning, right? With like I grew up in a town that's kind of like post-industrial, like kind of dying off. A lot of the old industry is kind of left, and the town's getting kind of worn out. Waterloo, Iowa, and I don't know if they've quite figured out how to revamp that town yet. But I grew up riding bikes with friends and, hanging out, playing football or tag or whatever. And then my parents always had projects to do, so we didn't get like an allowance or anything like that. If we wanted our spending money to go buy video games or whatever, even if it was like cleaning the toilets or, go clean the gutters or mow the yard or, do something. So it was always like sort of earn your keep sort of style with my folks. Which is good and bad. We'll see. I don't know yet. And then from there, I went to high school and I was a good student for a while, had like 4.0. And then by the time I graduated high school, I was like a 2.8. So it like plummeted hard in the last 2 years. Like I got really distracted with, stuff outside of school. I was working on my car. I was building sets for local theaters and stuff like that. I was running around everywhere, and I was really just ditching school a lot. And it wasn't great, but I got good enough test scores to get into college. And I went to University of Northern Iowa for biology for a little bit. And then I eventually transferred to Iowa State for aerospace engineering. And then I got really, really sick of school. This is, I think I was kind of going through school. I was kind of going through school just because it's what my folks wanted me to do. So I was just trying to find like what felt good, what felt right. And I don't think I ever really found that. So what happened was I ended up getting accepted into NYU through their Tisch school through Stella Adler for acting. So then I ended up moving to New York City to do that. And after a semester doing that, it kind of hit me hard that, I'm spending $50,000 a semester doing this, and it's for a degree that probably isn't going to advance that part of my career anymore, because the most like paid acting work I got was just through my own stuff, through finding like an agent and a manager and stuff like that, and having them find me work, or doing like modeling gigs. Um, so like, yeah, so I ended up just dropping out completely. I just said, forget
Okay.
it. And I dropped out. Um, and I was,
When you were, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, when you were growing up, you said you grew up in like a post-industrial sort of town. What type
Yeah.
of jobs were you aware of, sort of in that
Um,
community?
I mean, most of them very blue collar, right? A lot of truck driving, plumbing, that kind of stuff. I think my dad was sort of so fed up with me by the end of high school, he wanted me to just go to school for welding, for like a 6 month welding like training program, and then start being a welder or something. Um, which isn't a bad job. Welding's awesome, but I always worried about doing those sort of jobs, because I worried about the physical toll it would take on you after years and years in a career and that sort of stuff. Um, yeah, so
Did
like a lot of my jobs growing up. So my first job ever, I was 13, 12 or 13 years old. I was doing detasseling, which is like you work for corn companies, like seed companies, going through cornfields and helping them make like hybrid plants. You pull the flowers out of the top of corn, and like it's a weird Midwest Iowa thing. Then I think my next job after that, I worked at Home Depot for a little bit right out of high school. I worked there for 2 years, and then I worked at a Target distribution center. At one point, I was working all three of those jobs at the same time.
Oh, wow.
But
How were you able to balance that and school at the same
and
time?
college, yeah, that's why that was I hated. I was over school, man. School just wasn't my thing. I felt like I was learning a lot of stuff that I didn't really feel that like drawn towards. I felt like there was a lot of just sort of filler stuff, and a lot of teachers were kind of, well, it's not the teacher's fault, but a lot of it was kind of like teaching you a very narrow way to think, and not like exploring a very broad, um, not exploring different ways to approach problems. There was always like, this is the problem, this is the way you approach it. And I was always much more into like exploring, all right, well, what's a different route we can take at this? Like, why does that problem exist in the first place? Or, stuff like that. And I don't know. I just also just wasn't, I'm just not big on structured learning. I do much better self-driven. I do much better, which I'm not trying to, college. If I had all the money in the world, I'd be going to college full time all the time, because it's awesome to always learn. But I'm just, when you're doing it to hopefully make a living off of it, it wasn't something that I was big into at the time.
When you were going through all those different types of jobs, like for example, tasseling, did you ever have an interest in going into like agricultural engineering? I think that being from Illinois,
Yeah.
some of our schools actually have that as a major, agricultural engineering, which might
Yeah.
not be
So
in
like,
the.
I've got like like my mother's side is a big farming family. So that was kind of always there. I actually really was interested in more, so like doing sports growing up, and then also like being into like mechanics and stuff like that in high school and all that. I really wanted to do like engineering for prosthetics is what I wanted to do. I really thought that'd be cool, but I, you know, couldn't stick it out with the schooling to get that far. So um,
And what was it that you were studying again in college?
I did biology first, and then it was aerospace engineering after that,
Okay.
and then
And then what got you interested in those two, like biology and
um,
aerospace engineering?
biology was part of the sports thing. Like I just knew I wanted to do something, you know, that was kind of a broad selection in order to narrow it down further once I figured it out. Um, And then I don't know. Then I kind of flip flopped the other way and went with something much more mechanical in aerospace engineering. So it was just kind of me torn between all that stuff, and then I just completely fell off the rails and went with acting and got out of town completely. So it was just a weird. I always did like I did a lot of like theater stuff growing up. After like sports, it kind of, there was sports, and then there was kind of like the creative outlet of arts and theater and that kind of stuff. So like high school, I got into that, and then I kind of kept finding ways to like put a theater class in my curriculum every year of college. So then I was like, screw it, I'll just apply, and I got in. So I went out there. I think
what's classes like for acting?
For acting,
yeah,
very it's not like unless you're doing like script studying or something, like it's very like borderless, I guess. I don't know. Like it's, there's not like hard tests. There's not like, it's more how you show up and whether or not they've seen you grow as an actor that, in their class and that kind of thing. And then obviously once you get into places like NYU and stuff like that, they are taking it more seriously with how you're going to be marketable and stuff like that. So that's another big aspect to it once you get that far. So they start kind of guiding you in terms of what sort of roles you should be working on, what sort of roles is kind of like, because the hardest step is getting in, right? So like so they'll probably push you towards the role you're most likely to get hired for, which is kind of sucks because that leads to a lot of stereotypes and stuff like that. But that's the media world. People are used to seeing stuff a certain way, and that's especially they find something that works and they stick to that kind of that kind of thing for a while until it doesn't work anymore. So
was there any like development on the fullness of the of acting, I guess, like just being able to express different emotions? I don't know anything about acting, so I'm really curious about like what do they do to sort of train you, or
it's a lot. It's a lot of like a lot of emotion work, a lot of voice work, a lot of script work, a lot of and then they really encourage you, at least at the beginning, to explore different ways to be a character, and then kind of review on why that worked and why that didn't work. And it, you eventually whittle down more into the psychology of people and that kind of stuff, like why so-and-so would be feeling a certain way in this scene, or, that kind of stuff. And then, I don't know, once I got into it though, so I was doing I did some modeling jobs. I was working for like Abercrombie and Fitch and stuff for a little bit. I did some, some small, I think there was like a Kmart magazine or something that came out one time or something with a bunch of my pictures in it or something like that. So I did some of that, and I really hated that because that was like really shallow and kind of felt gross. And they had a lot of command over like if they had a shoot or if they had a casting, they would call you and be like, hey, we need you here and we need you there in 30 minutes. And like, you didn't have a choice. Like you had to be there, like no matter what you were doing.
It was just like an agent that would call you, or?
Yeah. So it was like, I was at a big agency called Wilhelmina, and they just have so many faces to where and they're a massive agency, which probably was a bad call to go for an agency so big, because then it becomes so impersonal. To where I think going for a smaller agency where you knew more people and it was, you had more connection with the person would have been better. But yeah, so there's so many people that if you don't show up, they can find another white guy. You know what I mean? So it's just like one of those things where it's just like, hey, we have a shoot here. It's for this. Be there at this address in 30 minutes. And then like if you didn't show up, like, they'd let you slide a little bit, but then like they'll drop you. But yeah, it just felt so dirty because it just, you just feel like you're a coat hanger, right? You're not really, you don't feel like you're creating value, which was like something that I really felt like I was missing. And then
What
that
was
kind
the
of
process like to get into that agency? Was it just
mine
anyone
was,
who submitted their names, they would be able to get it?
you
Or
can submit, I actually got, what was it called? It's called like an angel agent or something he called himself. I don't remember. I was just wandering around. And I walked through it was like a flea market I was wandering through one day, and some guy walked up to me. He's like, "Hey, which agency are you with?" And I didn't know what he's talking about. I was like, "What do you mean? I'm not with an agency. What are you talking about?" And he's just like, "Okay, well," and he gave me his name, and he's like, "Let me take you to dinner." So, okay, we went and grabbed some food really quick, and it was kind of weird, but I was young and didn't, whatever. Sure. I was also really broke. I think that was when I was homeless at the time. So that was kind of, yeah, I just, free food. Hell yeah, let's go. And yeah, so he ended up making a bunch of meetings with a lot of different agencies, and we kind of went in and met personally with everybody, and they know what they're looking for. So like I don't know. I've other friends who have gotten into modeling. They always like, oh, well, should I go get a photo shoot, or should I have a portfolio built up? And don't worry about that. They'll pay for it if that's what they want. If they see you and they see like, hey, you can work for you'd work for this, or we have a sort of a use for you. They'll cover all the other stuff. So
someone just walked up to you
yeah,
randomly.
I was just a random guy because I was wandering around because I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have like a house or anything. I was like crashing on a friend's couch for a little while, and then there was a couple times where I had to sleep on benches or subways or whatever. But yeah, I was, how old was I? 20, 21 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, and this guy just a random guy walked up to me on the street. You can submit yourself. You can totally do that. This was also in a time where I didn't, it wasn't common to have a smartphone or a laptop either. So it was like, it was much harder to submit yourself back then. And it was also, pre-Instagram, pre all that sort of deal.
What was this guy's affiliation to all those agencies? Because he introduced you to multiple ones. Right?
Yeah, so he would get a kickback, right? He would get like a percentage, like a founder's fee, like a finder's fee sort of thing. So that was kind of his drive. He just knew people. He'd gotten other models. He was a photographer, is what he was. So like, he took we did a photo shoot and stuff like that, and submitted some pictures later after getting picked up, and then yeah, and then it just went from there.
Yeah, that's so interesting that it's just someone walking to you on the street.
It's so weird. Yeah.
I would have never thought that would be the process, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of upset that no one's ever walked up to me. Clearly, it's not that says something. It's all right. So kind of during this process, were you in school then, in college? And you said you were a little
after. This was after I had dropped out.
Okay, so this was after you dropped out, and then you stayed in New York.
Yeah, I stayed in New York and didn't come back to Iowa because I wanted to see it through. I wanted to see it. A lot of it was my pride, right? My family didn't like me going out there. My family wanted me to stay here, finish school, do that sort of thing, and my pride wouldn't let me come back with my tail between my legs, sort of deal, and be living back at home. So I was kind of just stuck it out and figured it out, I guess.
And then during that process, once you got into the agency, I know you said you were sort of floating homeless. Was the acting career able to provide with enough income to start getting you back on your feet, or did you have to go work maybe as like a waiter or something like
Well,
that? To
I worked. No, it was mainly all the acting career. The acting career and the modeling got me enough money to get a place after a couple months. Um, I did work at what was it? I was one of those. Which company was that? Was it Hollister? Which one? What was the one that used to have the guys in the swim trunks stand out front of the store on Fifth Ave? I was one of them. I don't remember what the company was though.
I don't know. It
I was only work. I
could be
only did it for a
Hollister.
day, and I hated it. I did it for one day. I was like, nope, not doing this, because you get a bunch of tourists walking by, and they want to like touch you and stuff, and it's really weird and creepy. So I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. Thanks. But yeah, mainly the acting and modeling covered that. I did eventually get a manager who he had another company he was running, so I also helped him with stuff there. He had like a lecture. So he got professionals in the acting industry, like actors, directors, and stuff, and he hired them out as lecturers to universities. So I helped him do a lot of scheduling and arranging of actors, directors to go lecture at schools and stuff like that, and that paid some of the bills too. And then those were pretty much the only jobs I did back then, were those three.
And then on the acting side, were you able to be successful in getting into some maybe shows or a movie or something like
Yeah,
that?
I did some shows. I did quite a bit of like USA shows, like what was the one? Royal Pains was one. I don't know if you remember that show at all. There was a show where it was Steve Buscemi. Where I had dinner with Steve Buscemi, and we did Boardwalk Empire. I did a small stint on Boardwalk Empire for a little bit with him. I did some soap operas, so those were fun. Those were very interesting. Those were the most chill. Like, everybody knew what they are. They're soap operas, so everybody's kind of chilling. And that was a pretty regular thing going on soap operas. I did All My Children and One Life to Live back or after they moved off air and they were online only shows. I did a couple movies, not very big roles. One was, I don't know if there are any that are well known enough to even say. No. And then I did some like off Broadway shows, so like some live stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I guess how did you go from that and then coming back to Iowa, or what happened after that part of your career?
I just got really sick of it all. I got like, it just started to feel very shallow. It felt very like self-serving. It didn't feel, yeah, it didn't feel like I was creating much. Right. And I think, I don't know. Yeah. Like, I've always been somebody who likes to build and likes to create and likes to do stuff with my hands. And like, uh, yeah, it just didn't feel like I was doing that. It felt like it was like, content that I didn't really care about. Like, they're just shows that, I would get a paycheck and I'd be like, all right, cool. And they were fun. It was fun, made a lot of great stories and all that, but it never felt like something I wanted to do long term after doing it for 3 or 4, or I guess it was like 3 years. I had ended up having kind of a falling out with my manager, and I just like thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I just like, this isn't what I wanted to do. And at the time I was working out a lot because that was, my job, was to look good. And so I'd go to the gym really late, like go to the gym at like 12:30 at night, almost every night. And I had like a group of people there who eventually they wanted to start working out with me. So they'd work out with me. And it got to the point where they were paying me a little bit to, be their kind of like personal trainer that was uninsured, and they didn't care because I was cheap and that kind of stuff. And so that got me thinking. And then eventually I was like, I'm just going to become a personal trainer. So I started doing that, and I started working at a big corporate gym. And I did that, and I really enjoyed it. I love, my clients were awesome. I met a whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different walks of life. Yeah, I think the whole acting thing, oddly enough, what killed it for me was all the drama. Like it was just like constant drama, like
What
um
type of drama do you mean?
it's like, yeah, just who got picked for what, or like, oh wow, how did they get that and when I didn't get that, that kind of like kind of fake happy for each other stuff. Everybody's only friends with you as long as you can do something for them kind of feeling. It was just hard to know who to trust in that kind of environment for me. And that really, yeah, kind of, I wasn't just kind of over it.
You seem pretty successful in it though. Like to be able to pay for rent in New
Oh, well, I
York.
mean, I
That
was paying,
seems that
I was
seems
paying for a 1 bedroom in like a 3 bedroom apartment, like
yeah.
I was not, I mean, there was a time where I was waiting for a friend waiting for his lease to run out. So like we were sleeping in the same bed, like head to toe, like just like waiting for his lease to run out for a couple months before we went and got another cheap apartment somewhere. And it was just like, yeah, it was still very like, I never felt like I had a home, right? It was always living out of a suitcase. And I think the longest I had an apartment at the beginning or during that time was like a year maybe, or before it was like, oh, time to move and find something else because this one got too expensive, or, like whatever, or having weird roommates who you weren't the greatest to live with, or somebody's bringing in cockroaches or bed bugs or all that different stuff you got to worry about in close proximity living.
Could you walk us through a little bit of like the psychology of what it was like to kind of go through that period of your life of, starting from a homeless perspective to decide I'm going to stay here, and because of my pride, I'm going to just grind it out and try to make it. That seems pretty
Stubborn
extreme.
is what it is. It's stubborn is what it is. I don't, I just, I've always kind of believed that I can figure it out. Right. Like there's been stuff has always happened. Stuff always will. And then, I mean, to be fair, that period of my life has also scarred me quite a bit going forward. Right. Like I never feel like the next paycheck is always coming. I'm always worried about, I always have a feeling like everything I've gotten to now can always go away, which helps some, but also leads to a lot of anxiety. So, but yeah, I don't know. It was just stubbornness. It was just like my folks and I didn't get along that well. And, yeah, I didn't want to prove them right. So like I was just going to keep going and not tell them anything and just keep working through it. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What was their expectation of you, I guess, or what did they want you to do? Just be a welder? Is that
they
what
want,
they
yeah,
did?
oh, that was kind of like, that's, every time I went home for the holidays, my dad's like, oh, well, you could be a plumber. We need a whole bunch of plumbers now, like trying to convince me obviously they're doing it out of fear, right? They're worried that I'm going to be homeless. They're worried I'm going to, something bad's going to happen. But it was also, and that's fair. That's what parents are. That's what parents do. But I wanted to push for something more. I wanted to have a story to my life. I didn't want to be the person who never left my hometown, right? Like, so yeah, I kind of, that stubbornness of them not really, I never felt, I felt like they didn't really understand what I wanted to do. And of course they wanted me to be safe, and safety was kind of not on my top of my priority list. I wanted to figure out what the world was about and go out and learn, which I think I learned a lot of stuff doing that. I learned, I learned a lot about how tough the world can be if you're not in the right place and if you don't have anybody to have your back. So, yeah, I guess that's.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that part of the story, because I think it's really, really inspiring. And I think it, resonates even with me, my relationship with my parents, what their expectations were. I think that that's a touch point that, many people experience. And for a lot of people, sometimes they just go with something that they're not happy with because it's the expectation of, their family, their community, and things like that. So I think it takes a ton of guts for what you did. Like, I don't think I would have had that to be able to do that.
I don't know how I feel about it, right? Because like I did it, and it's a great story, and like met a lot of cool people. I've got a lot of kind of crazy contacts in my phone that would probably never answer their phone now. But yeah, at the same time, I also came to the conclusion that it wasn't what I wanted, right? So it's like, all right, well, uh, hit and miss.
Yeah, and then I guess from there you became the fitness.
Yeah, I became a personal trainer. So I was
Okay.
doing personal training, and I was working at this gym, this club in New York, and met a whole bunch of people, had a whole bunch of really cool clients. I was in great shape. I was in the best shape of my life. I was getting picked up to do like some other modeling gigs that I was unsure about, but it was more like the fitness modeling gigs, not like the uh, commercial stuff, I guess, as much. And yeah, and I eventually worked my way up to become the biggest trainer at that club or at that gym, at that location, not the whole gym. And was doing great. And, I had a long-term girlfriend at the time, and she also became a personal trainer, and we were, working hard on that. And then one day I was going home late from work, and I got hit by a car. I was going home on my motorcycle, and I got hit by a car that ran a red light. And yeah, I woke up in the hospital with a broken forearm, broken thumb, broken jaw, chipped knee, broken toe. Yeah. And so then that sent me into a long recovery there with having my jaw wired shut, and I lost a bunch of weight, and, couldn't work out for a while, and months of that. And then that kind of pushed me into a depression for a while. And then when I came back to the gym, I had found out that they had been taking advantage of like all of my clients. Kind of, they had been, since I was the largest trainer at the gym, they didn't want to lose that monthly income of clients paying, right? So they kept charging them, but weren't training them anymore. So I ended up canceling all their memberships like a week after I got back, and training them for free for a couple months. And then I quit that gym and started my own personal training company. And that was another leap of just trying to figure it out, and not wanting to have sort of my reputation tied up with other people doing things I wasn't agreeing with. So that's kind of what got me more entrepreneurial, I guess, like really started teaching me more about how to run business and stuff like that. So yeah, I went into like a depressive episode and then because of course I wasn't making any money anymore. So I like went into a depressive episode and like had a rough time for a while where I was worried I wasn't going to make rent and stuff like that because I wasn't making money, and I was trying to build up this new personal training company. And like some of my clients, like I would say like 50% of my clients came with me, but like the whole setup process took a couple months, and just getting that rolling again took a while. And then, yeah, eventually I had my own personal training company that I had contracts with a whole bunch of other gyms around town. And I was training clients at all them or their personal gyms in their apartment buildings, stuff like that. And that's when I got into building a website for the company. And I like looking at like, Squarespace and what are they, Wix and Weebly and all those websites. And I like really didn't like any other layouts. So I started kind of making my own. And that's when I went down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I kind of dig this code stuff. Like HTML, CSS, that kind of stuff, and started learning there. And one of my clients was a developer or a software engineer. And talking to him about it, and he kind of helped guide me a little bit and, tell me like, oh, you should, if you're checking out that right now, you should go study this. And that really kind of helped me a lot. So I really went down, did that for about 6 months. And while I was running my own, while I was growing the personal training company. So the personal training company obviously is like which I loved. I loved my clients. I loved having my own company. I loved that sort of freedom, but it's also highly competitive. You never know, when clients are going to stay or when they're going to go. So it's never like a sure income. And then like obviously taking a vacation is rough because when you're the only person that works, when you're the only person working for the company and it doesn't make money without you, then like you're just not making money if you go on vacation. And like the hours for that were, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. were kind of the hours. So that it was really like just rough hours. Like I had no life outside of my business or sitting at home with my dog sort of thing. And then so I had eventually I got my books completely full there and I was doing well. I was, pulling in a good chunk of change every month. And then I started getting other trainers that were working not really for me, but I was getting them clients and like building their books out with my kind of overflow. And then I was really enjoying the code thing and talking to one of my clients more about it. And I really wanted the freedom. I really wanted that, like that work remote, work from anywhere kind of lifestyle. So I ended up joining a boot camp like Nick was talking about. He did Nick, the guy you had on an earlier podcast. He did the same boot camp. He did his through Northwestern, I believe, and I did mine through Rutgers. I did it to fill some kind of knowledge gaps that I didn't have, right? After teaching myself, I had no idea what professional coding meant. I was just building stuff for fun on my computer. So like having that and using it as a way to talk to professionals and people in the industry and pick their brain about like, hey, how can I do this better? Or how does the industry do this? Or like, what is it like to actually work for a software company kind of thing? Was really helpful. And then I didn't have a college degree, but doing a boot camp that had a college's name put on it, a lot of HR people are probably just going to glaze over that. So they're not going to notice it. So that allowed me to get a college name on my resume, and that helped out. And then I got my first code work or like coding gig, I guess, was with my client who I was still personal training. He had some extra work that he would throw my way. And those were kind of my learning projects and build up a resume and a portfolio sort of deal. And then after that, I got kind of an offer from two different companies. I had one back here in the Midwest to do more of what I wanted, but for a lot less pay, or one in New York that was going to pay a lot of money, but was only a contract for 4 months. So I took the one back here in the Midwest, packed up all my stuff out of New York after 6 years, moved back to Illinois, moved back to the Quad Cities down there to work for John Deere through a contracting company for them. And yeah, and they had like the beginning of it was kind of a junior program for kids fresh out of college. And then it was kind of strange because it was kids fresh out of college. And then it was myself and another friend of mine from the boot camp who I brought with me, who I also had him get a job there. And it was really kind of, it was just very interesting to be all of a sudden back with fresh out of college kids who hadn't really seen very much yet. And but yeah, I was getting paid the least because I didn't have a degree. And my friend and I who came with both out of the boot camp, we were both getting, like 15,000 less than everybody else or something right off the bat. But I don't know, we stuck it out. We pushed through. I think, ended up getting on a project pretty early. So I used that as leverage to negotiate for, getting paid bumped up to at least what everybody else was getting paid. And then was there for about a year and a half, and then got another job over here where I'm at now in Des Moines, and got a job at Principal Financial, and that gave me about a 50% pay boost. So that took me from 67 to 95. And then I was there for a year, and then they gave me a bump up to 120. And Principal, I liked Principal. Principal was awesome. It was kind of like the first job was kind of hit and miss because it was contracts and you didn't really know what projects you were going to be on, which is, it's a fresher job. It's a junior level job. You're kind of just figuring it out, and they were kind of just doing whatever. But Principal was probably the first company I was with that was more organized. More but it was a financial company. It wasn't a tech company, right? Tech wasn't their first. Tech wasn't what they were selling. It was just kind of what supported it. So it had its own problems where, like the engineering side of it came second. It was all what could be sold first. It was all business first. So there were a lot of communication problems and stuff, but it was still the first like organized tech job that I did, with, good, well-structured teams, stuff like that. And then pretty soon later, Nick called me up, and he was working at Glassdoor, and he said he wanted me to apply. So now he and I work together every day. So we're back working together.
Okay. It's kind of to go back a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
When you had finished Rutgers and did a little bit some of the projects with your former client, what was the interview process like for that John Deere company, and also the other company that you potentially could have gone with?
Yeah, so they were, because they were more junior level, they weren't as intense. They didn't do any like coding interviews right off the bat, which was interesting. But it was also in a time.
Is that common for entry level positions?
I don't think so. I mean, it depends. It depends on where you're at. So the thing in the Midwest, yes, it's a common, because in the Midwest we have more jobs than we have people to work them, especially in tech. So a lot of companies will kind of just take you on your word. You can kind of just figure it out, which was kind of the hope.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking to get into tech, like, yeah, you could shoot for Facebook or Google right away, which would be awesome. But they're also, also know that you're in a highly competitive field where they can find somebody else to replace you. In the Midwest, there's not a lot of people around here doing tech. So like, there's still a lot of big companies around here that need it, especially the further we go forward. So, there weren't any. That first job, there wasn't a coding interview. Even the other one was a PowerShell scripting job. So it was very basic. It was going to be like setting up a bunch of machines for another financial firm down in like Battery Park in Manhattan. And it was basically going in, setting up computers, and then putting PowerShell scripts in to run when they turn the machine on, right? So it wasn't very creative. It was kind of just like going to be doing the same thing on repeat for 4 months. So that's why I let that one go, even though the pay was quite a bit higher. But it was also in an area where cost of living was twice as high. Moving back to the Midwest kind of allowed me to have a lot more flexibility with income, right? I'm not stuck. Even if I have to pay rent, I can still leave,
Yeah, absolutely. And then you said you went into principal. How was that interview like? What was it like
that one did
from
so
that job?
That one was an in-person interview. That one I had to go in, and that one was in person. There was a coding questions in person in front of people, which is kind of nerve-wracking when you all of a sudden somebody's looking over your shoulder and judging you on how well you're doing it. But I actually did it wrong. I wrote in kind of some old code, or old how do you say it? Old formatting, I guess. We wrote in a way that wasn't, isn't up to modern standards. And I got it correct. I got it done. But he told me, he's like, hey, could you rewrite this as, in modern stuff? I was like, oh, I don't know that. Could you teach me it? And I talked to him later, and he's like, the reason I hired you is because you asked me to teach you. Like, you asked me, you said you didn't know it. You admitted that you didn't know it. And then you asked me, can you teach me it really quick? And then I taught you for 15 minutes, and then you had it. And I was like, all right, cool. That's how I got that job. So like, don't be afraid to say you're stupid, like, especially in tech, everybody's stupid. Nobody really knows what's going on all the time. We're just get better at Googling what we're looking for, like,
yeah, I love that advice. I never even thought about that, just to ask for the answer, especially during an interview, right?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of odd, right? Because it was kind of like I had proven I could solve it, and I had proven that I knew what the issue was and how to solve it. I just didn't know how to solve it maybe the most efficient way. So yeah, just, ask. Just be like, hey, this is how I would solve it. This is my thought process on it. And they're like, okay, that's cool, but what about this? I was like, oh, well, I didn't know that, but what does that mean? It's like, show me, and I think that's a very useful thing in a lot of different fields.
Could you walk us through a little bit of like the day to day between the John Deere one and also the Principal one versus currently Glassdoor? You said
Right.
that, at Principal, you started to work in a more structured team environment.
Right.
Could you kind of just detail what that meant compared?
Yeah. So the first job it was a contracting company for John Deere. So they kind of got the contract, and there was kind of that, like, kind of telephone game going on in there where there was a little bit of a disconnect in communication all the time, because our team that was working on it was not in direct communication with the project manager that was at John Deere waiting for it, sort of deal. So you'd come in and you'd kind of build what you thought you were supposed to be doing, and then it turns out like, oh well, we're scrapping that, we're not doing that. And you just spent a month working on that, like, to where once you got in the Principal, it was you were in much more direct communication with the people who were expecting the project done, to where that shortened time. Like, instead of wasting a month, you maybe wasted a morning, right? You could just talk to them at your meeting at like whatever it was, 2:00 or whatever. Just be like, hey, this is what I've been working on. Is this what you want? And they'd be like, oh no, do this. Or they'd say, yeah, that's what we were hoping for. So like that organization, having stuff in a system to track productivity was helpful. That first contracting job was just sort of like, hey, this is what you guys are kind of work on this week. And like, there was no idea when stuff was actually going to get done. They just kind of had a rough timeline. Yeah. And then Principal had, much more of a management for productivity and stuff like that. And there's up times and down times. There's times where you're pushing really hard and you got to get a project done. There's times where you don't have much to do for the next month. So you're kind of just snooping around and finding if you can help people, or, looking through what you've worked on in the past and see if you could improve it, or, just stuff like that. So where it's much more relaxed than it sounds, like.
Like, who do you answer to in that? Because you were in these junior level positions, do you answer to a more senior
Yeah.
front end developer, or is there a team, a tech lead or
It was
team
actually
lead?
it was actually interesting at that first contracting job, because I primarily work as a front end developer. I primarily work in JavaScript, and specifically a JavaScript library called React. And they had nobody experienced in React. So I kind of got there as a junior and was in like this training course, and they were teaching me Java and stuff. And then all of a sudden they got this contract where they needed React developers, and they didn't have any. Like, it was myself and the one guy I brought with me. And then like he and I had kind of teamed up to teach some of the other juniors React. And then we kind of brought everybody together on a team. One of them was Nick from before. And yeah, it was very strange. So we didn't really have a senior. We had like people to report to what we were getting done, but as front end developers there, we didn't have a senior developer. It was very odd. Most people there were working in more data driven projects and stuff like that. So it was very strange.
Is that the usual dynamic, or what
No,
were you usually
never.
like?
Usually you're working with somebody who knows more than you do. So that way it can improve, which is, it was interesting in the first job, having to be sort of self-led and having to kind of figure stuff out. It was interesting to a point, but then obviously that's why I got to that interview at Principal and didn't know the most modern way to write this, because we didn't have somebody to look up to. So yeah, I would definitely always there's always somebody who's smarter than you. There's always somebody who knows it or knows it differently or knows it better or, has a different approach than you do. And whether or not theirs is better, yours is better, there's still something to learn from it. So like having those other minds around is super helpful.
So then from principal, what made you decide to go over to Glassdoor? What made you think I needed a change, or was an opportunity just presented to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it was Nick, right? He and I had worked together and had fun working together in the past. There was obviously an increase in pay and stuff like that came with it. But the big thing about Glassdoor is that it was finally a job. Glassdoor is probably the first job I've worked for where I felt more belief in the company, more belief in the product. Glassdoor is very much it's a company review website that allows employees to review their companies and speak up for themselves. So it's really helping people find, their worth, which I think is awesome. I think a lot of people undervalue themselves, and I think working for a company like that that's actively trying to help with that sort of thing it lines up perfectly. And like, obviously, increase in pay is great. There's more flexibility that came with that. They do, they practice what they preach. They're very good to all of their employees. And was also the first company I worked for that was tech first. Like, their product is all on the website. It's all there. So like, it also, as an engineer, gives me a lot more pull and a lot more say into how we do stuff. It is interesting switching to that because you come in, you're a little timid about speaking up on stuff like that when you come from jobs that, were sort of set in their ways and had their thing that they were doing. But it's awesome. You feel it's much more fulfilling.
Was there a lot more mentorship too, or just learning because you're walking into a fully tech driven environment? The talent there is potentially more.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot smarter people to reach out to and ask questions, right? Like maybe not smarter, but like, tech savvy, like have been doing this for years, sort of thing. So that's really awesome to see. It's also, funny to be working back next to Nick again every day where like, we have our banter and our sort of back and forth and help each other grow without, it feels like you have somebody. The thing I always struggle with, right, is pride. Like it's tough for me to ask questions because then I feel like I'll look stupid or, something like that. And it's awesome having a guy around, whether it's any of the other coworkers on my team who I can also talk to, or Nick. It's awesome finding somebody that you can talk to and admit you don't know what the hell you're doing and not feel dumb when you do it. So yeah, that's been a huge factor too.
Yeah, that sounds like a amazing work environment.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm working there, and that's the job I've been looking for. It's full remote. It's flexible. You can work from anywhere. And now I'm kind of moving into, like, right now I'm at a Airbnb I've been working on designing and setting up, and I have some other properties I'm invested in and stuff like that. And now I'm working on getting my pilot's license to make it even more full-time mobile and, fly wherever I want to go and work from wherever I want to work from.
Are most of the careers in engineering remote now, or how does that landscape look?
That's a tough question. There's kind of there are the capitalist purists, I guess. I don't know what capitalism purists, I guess you want to call them. I don't know what you want, where they think if you're not in the office, you're not working. Or they're the control freaks that want you in an office, right? And you may have to deal, especially early on in a career. I think it's good to be in an office. I think having that face-to-face, working side by side, helps you learn a lot faster. You can do it from home, but it's, cut that learning period down from 6 years to 2 years, right, by being in an office next to somebody who knows what they're doing. Um,
Were your first two jobs in person
yeah,
in the
well,
office?
principal moved to work from home because of COVID, which they are now back to a hybrid, so they're back in office. I think part of that is also, I mean, it depends on the company. I know companies in the Midwest here that are full remote, and I know ones that are all back in the office too. I would say, as much as I love working from home, can also be very isolating. So that's, sometimes when you're having a bad day at home, it's just you having a bad day. Like you don't have anybody to talk to. So
You can't just call up someone else on the team to,
yeah,
hey,
you're just
let's
not just
schedule
like,
a
hey, what are you
meeting.
doing? You want to go grab coffee real quick? I need a break and like vent for a while. Like you just got to sit there. So that can be kind of tough, but I mean, you can go out and go for a walk or something, but it's still, not having somebody to talk to can be very isolating sometimes.
Could you walk through a little bit like what it's like to work in a remote environment, I guess? Like, do you have to check in every couple hours or
Um,
every day? How does that
every
work?
day. I mean, as long as you like, it depends on the environment, but like the current environment I'm in is more of as long as you communicate and get your work done, we're fine sort of deal. So like as long as I tell them like, hey, you guys, I'm going to be out today, like I got an appointment or like I'm not feeling good or whatever, they're okay with that. Um, and then as long as you say like, hey, I worked on this yesterday, I updated, I fixed this problem, I'm still looking into this problem, and sort of keep them up to date on where your work is and who's expecting what. They're pretty laid back about it. I know at my last job with principal working from home, that was you had to have your cameras on, you had to be, but that was also a job where they were used to being in an office and used to everybody being around all the time. So it is an interesting transition to see that change. But yeah, my day to day is, I mean, most of the time I like to be there. I like to see everybody, check in, say hi. Get on, we do have a meeting once a day for everybody on the team to at least talk and check in, and I find those are always helpful to be on because those are the best time to ask questions, and those are the times where you can catch people to ask questions. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The camera on the whole day sounds pretty
not the whole
intense.
day, but during we had the
Yeah.
principal was not good at making meetings concise. So you ended up running 3 hours with your camera on, and you're like, man, I need to go to the bathroom. Like, can I get out of here?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I do want to talk a little bit about the Airbnb and things like that. The
Yeah.
your flexibility in doing that a little bit later. Right now, could you kind of walk through like recommendations wise, if someone's first, who do you think being a software engineer would be a fitting career for? Because you sort of went through a self discovery phase. I feel like you might be the best person to describe like the types of person, the types of
Yeah.
people that may be interested in this.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're somebody so for being a software engineer, yeah, code in general, if you're somebody who likes problem solving and likes exploring solutions, or like me, my biggest connection with it is I have always loved building things, right? And this is a way where I can create stuff without necessarily ruining my body doing a construction job or welding like my dad wanted me to do or anything like that. I still get to create. I still get to build new things, try new things, see it pop up. It's on a screen, but it's not. I'm not building a shed in the backyard, but it's still cool to see. And then you get to see how people interact with it and hear their responses to it. And that's to me, that's always been a big motivator and something that I putting something out there that I can be really proud of. So I think if you're somebody who, yeah, likes problem solving, likes puzzles, likes messing around on a computer, likes probably playing video games, I guess. Like, uh, go for it, give it a shot, try it. I mean, the worst that can happen is you don't like it and you ended up smarter, like so. um, Plus, going forward, I think a lot of everything is going to be knowing how, at least like the basics of how code works and stuff like that is going to be helpful for almost every job going forward. So, um, but I don't, to me, when you're trying to figure out your career or something you want to do, maybe like a lot of people say, like, do what you love or do your passion or whatever. And to me, I would say do what you like being the best at or being good at, right? Do what you like getting better at. So if there's something you do where you enjoy seeing yourself progress, because, you're not always going to be successful. There's going to be days that suck, but as long as you can appreciate your progression at whatever you're doing, I think that's a big motivator for me anyways. I know my passions over the years have changed and flip-flopped a lot. So like, I think when looking for a career, yeah, do the thing that you're proud to be good at.
And would you say it's okay to flounder a little bit too?
Oh yeah, you have to. Like, you have to go out and flounder and fail and smack your head into the wall multiple times and look stupid and all that. But, nobody remembers the times you look stupid. They always remember the time that you got up. Only you remember the time you look stupid. That's what you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, but they all, they'll see the end product. So focus on the end.
That's great advice. And what are the pathways to get, into engineering?
Honestly, so there's, you could do school, you could do a boot camp, you could self-taught. Combination of all the above is probably the best. The issue with school is they teach you a lot of stuff, but a lot of times, replacing books and curriculums is expensive. So a lot of times you'll come out of college and you'll be some of the stuff you'll have learned will be obsolete or deprecated and not useful anymore. Boot camps are a little bit more flexible, but not taken as seriously as a college degree. And then obviously self-taught, you really got to prove that you know what you're talking about. So, some sort of combination of all three, building up your own understanding, your own portfolio, and then also just building up your ability to communicate with other people, and being able to come across as, knowledgeable to the best extent you can. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't know sometimes, a lot of people are afraid to say, like, hey, I don't know that. And they're worried that I think a lot of people are more worried about looking dumb than they are about learning. So don't be afraid to look dumb. Just worry about trying to learn as much as you can. And eventually, you'll get picked up somewhere. And then as long as you keep learning, you'll get to wherever you want to go.
Yeah. Have you ever seen someone do self-taught and get a job, and what that process looks like? I'm just curious if you've ever seen that. I
mean, I don't know of anybody who is strictly self-taught. Everybody, there's courses online, there's boot camps, all that stuff. So they're all kind of a self-taught those two are kind of a self-taught direction, I guess. The boot camp's a little bit more structured. I think the biggest thing for that would be to just have a portfolio, have something built up of projects you've solved. And then, there are a lot of websites these days that you can get on to find little projects and pick up on, or GitHub is a big version control and has a lot of different libraries in it that you can add to yourself if there's a big general library that people enjoy, or even small little projects where somebody's building 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 an app that building an app that better displays information on voting data or something like that. You can hop on and add to that repo and get it approved, and then your name will always be associated with that. And you can put that in your portfolio, and you can be like, look, this is, I did work on this. I didn't get paid for it, but this was free work that I did just to get my foot in the door, and I can do that same thing for you, I think especially for that first job, having that portfolio. I think my portfolio has been looked at every job I've went to. I don't update it.
What does the portfolio consist of? Is it like here's a GitHub?
Yeah, so mine's just a page with a link to all my projects. With like a little bit of a demo, like some slides of what the project is, and then a link to it hosted somewhere, and a link to the repo in GitHub. That's what mine is, and then like a way to contact me, and sort of my background and my history, that kind of stuff, and my knowledge base. That's what mine is, just like a history of some of my work and a way to contact me. And I have it linked on my resume, to where most resumes are sent around as PDFs these days. So my resume links to my GitHub, my code box, my LinkedIn, and my portfolio. So they can click through all those, see how I've progressed and how stuff has changed. It is interesting because I haven't updated my portfolio since I got my first job. So I get some funny questions, but I just tell them straight up, just like, listen, I've been working in it, and like I do projects on my own, as you can see on my resume, and those aren't in my portfolio because they were owned by somebody else, paid me for those projects. So I don't have the rights to those. I can't put it in my portfolio. But yeah, I think if you're going to be self-taught, it's figure out which path you want first, right? What do you want to do in code? Do you want to work in data? Do you want to work in AI, which is going to be huge? Do you want to work in front end, which is, a little bit more design, a little bit more, artistic stuff? Find that path and then just hone in on whatever you really enjoy. So for me, like, I got lucky. I really enjoyed React right off the bat, so I started building in that. Turns out it's a relatively popular library, like it's one of the most used libraries for front-end development. But yeah, find what you enjoy working in, find a problem you're really interested in solving, and go out and solve it. And then show them that, hey, look, I solved this, and I can solve your problems too, right?
Yeah, no, I think that this is the most detailed I've ever gone into with like resume building and portfolio building. So this is great. And then sort of lifestyle wise, could you kind of walk through a little bit of what software engineering as a career has been able to help you do, outside of like stability, maybe, just kind of talk.
I still, I'm an anxious person. I still have issues with that from in the past, being not so stable, right? I'm always a little worried that the next thing is going to go away. So I kind of save a lot of money and invest a lot of it into things around me to try to make myself feel more secure in that kind of thing. But this year especially, I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to feel more comfortable. Software engineering, it's allowed me to buy a house, allowed me to buy a couple houses, I guess, some investment properties, build up a good savings emergency fund, just retirement accounts, that kind of thing. And then have full flexibility over a lot more flexibility with my time and how I want to use it. And, code is awesome. I love doing code, but it's not something I want to do all the time every day. So I spend my time on some other things. I work on cars still in the garage. I got those all torn apart and never put back together. And I'm getting my pilot's license, and a couple weeks ago, I took off and went and picked up a plane down in Florida and flew it down to the Keys, and then flew it up to New Orleans, and flew it back to Des Moines, and just been able to bring my laptop with the whole way. So it's kind of,
that's really cool.
Don't like, obviously live within your means. Don't overstretch or whatever. But there are, especially with as expensive as stuff is getting, there are parts of the world that are much more affordable to live in, and you could totally do that too. And if it weren't for probably family and friends around here, I'd probably be out, I don't know, down in Mexico or out in Bali somewhere or something like that, like hanging out. But for now, I'm building a couple other businesses and nonprofit projects that I'm working on that I think really calls me more now. So I'm sticking around a little bit. We got more of a home base going on, and that's kind of what I've been spending my time on.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of cool to see the entire story arc of your life, where it was you tried all sorts of things, and then you were able to identify this one career path that was able to stabilize everything, and then you went back into the exploratory, side a little bit.
But yeah, there's an interesting balance to find in like chasing your dreams and having the means to chase your dreams. I think having something that you enjoy doing for work, that, yeah, maybe you're doing it for somebody else and not for yourself, but having that stability allows you a base to build the rest off of. And my hope is to retire early, right? Like my hope is to be retired at 35. May not happen, or maybe not retired, but work optional by 35, right? Like I love Glassdoor, and I could work here for a long time, right? I sit in the chair most of the day, so it's not like I'm killing myself doing this, but yeah, just like having that, getting to the point where I can be completely stress-free, and especially, having a family someday and being able to be home for that kind of stuff and focus more on that kind of stuff, I think it's going to be huge. I think that's going to be time that's irreplaceable. And like, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of taken a lot of your time already. Is there any advice that we haven't really touched upon, or subject that we haven't touched upon, that you would like to kind of tell our viewers?
Yeah. Be open to stuff, right? Like just new ideas, different ways to do things. While you're young, look stupid, because it's much worse to look stupid when you're old, right? Like, yeah, go, learn stuff. School probably didn't teach you about credit scores or investing or any of that. Go look at some of that before you mess that stuff up, because that can put you back a couple of years if you don't do that right. Yeah, and always be open to the next thing.
Yeah, no, I think you've dropped a lot of great information, and like throughout this interview, which I think is really, really important, especially the story that you kind of told about your life. I think you've really gone through the trials, much more so than a lot of other people, and to be able to kind of come out of that, I think, is highly admirable and really an inspiration. So for anyone who has any questions for Scot, feel free to contact us at info@mentoraccess.com, and we will relay the messages. So anything you have, whether it's questions or life advice that you'd like to get from Scot, feel free to contact us, and we'll make sure to pass that message. Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us at Mentor Access. If you like what you just watched, please click like and subscribe, and also hit that bell so that you get notified when we have new videos come out. Thank you for supporting our mission.